administrator with the LTM project. I work with Malene Friis Hansen on the LTM project, and I'm quite new to the Macaque world. So I'm just eager to learn and hopefully contribute also. Yeah, nice to meet you.
Cool, thank you, Naja. Next I have Saeed.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Saeed Shafi Sabet. I'm a biologist, and well, actually, I'm interested to see how anthropolytic sound may be a little bit different from the topic, but how anthropolytic sound may affect underwater species like fish and invertebrates in terms of predator-prey interactions, foraging performance, and also spatial distribution. So yeah, I received my PhD at Leiden University in the Netherlands, and now I'm doing my postdoc research at University of Gilland. So I'm really happy to join the discussion and yeah, get some feedback or yeah, any thoughts about the primates, macaques. Yeah.
Thank you, Saeed. Next I have is Sabrina, almost the same name as mine. Okay.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sabrina Koirala from Nepal, originally from Nepal, but I'm currently in Beijing, China. I have been working on macaque ecology and behavioral ecology on rhesus macaques and Macaque asamensis in Nepal, and also some studies of human-macaque interaction. And I recently completed my PhD from University of Chinese Academy of Sciences, and I conducted a study for human rhesus macaque conflict dynamics in Nepal, and I just finished that study. So this workshop is very much relevant to my study. And nice to meet you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabrina. Dave, next. Dave, can you hear me? Hello, Dave. Can you hear me?
Hi, sorry, yes, Sabrina.
Yeah. Sorry.
Sorry, yeah, my internet just dropped out for a second there, I think.
No
yeah, nice to meet everybody. I'm Dave Neal. I'm the Animal Welfare Director for Animals Asia. I'm actually one of the note takers for this session, so excuse me if I'm a little bit quiet whilst I'm busy jotting down everything that everybody says. Just as a background, then I manage a team of people in Vietnam which are working on various wildlife projects, including the macaque issue, some of which is in wildlife government rescue centres, but obviously we're also very interested in learning more and trying to have an impact on some of the human macaque interaction issues which are happening both within Vietnam and in other countries.
Thank you, Dave, and for helping to take down notes. Next, I have Anne from Animal Protection. Yes.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, good. Yeah, good morning, everybody. I'm Anne-Sophie. I'm from Denmark. I work for Animal Protection Denmark, and I'm a biologist, and I'm the project leader on our international projects. And we support 2 macaque projects, and that's why I'm here today. So one is Malene's project, a long-tail macaque project, and the other one is Alice or the Scorpion Foundation's macaque project. So, yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. Jocelyn from ACRES.
Hi, I'm Jocelyn from ACRES in Singapore, and we are an animal advocacy society. I'm with the wildlife management team, and a large part of our work involves human-macaque conflict.
Thank you, Jocelyn. So Jocelyn and her colleague Charlene just passed their monkey guts assessment yesterday. So perhaps later she can share more. Next I have Monica. Sure, you can hear me.
Hello, hi everyone. My name is Monica, and I'm associated with the University of Mysore, where we work on the Nicobar long-tail macaques. We're trying to understand their feeding ecology and the interactions with the residents of the island. And so far, we've conducted socioeconomic surveys with some farmers and just began a focused plantation monitoring program, but then we had to discontinue it due to the pandemic. So that's where we are with respect to the study. I'm looking forward to this workshop. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Next, I have Kaishan from Language Project Penang.
Hello, I'm Kaitian. I'm from Language Project Penang, Malaysia. And our team always encountered macaques during our fieldwork and environmental education program. So I'm here to learn about monkey gardening, and I always wanted to learn about it since I know this. Yeah, hope to learn. Thank you.
Good to have you and see you, Kaishan. Next, I have Gwenan. I hope I pronounce it right.
Yes, it's good pronunciation. Thank you. So yeah, I'm Gwenan. I'm from University of Liège in Belgium, and I'm conducting my PhD in Bali on the long-tail macaque, and there is a sterilization project since 3 years now, and I'm studying the effect of the sterilization on the macaque social behaviors.
Thank you. Next, I have Ali from Scorpion. Ali, can you hear me? Okay. Alternatively, you can also introduce yourself in the chat if your internet's like bad or you don't want to turn on your camera. Okay, I'll just move on, right? Dheeraj? Okay, still on the way. Got it. Take your time.
Hello, everyone. Myself, Dheeraj. I recently postgraduated, and now I am working in a project where we are mainly focusing on behavior and cognition of rhesus macaque and their relationship with other species. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to learn things from the workshop. Thank you.
Thank you, Dheeraj. Next, I have Sarantan.
Yeah, hi everyone. This is Sarantan. I'm also associated with the University of Mysore, like my colleague had earlier stated. I'm primarily interested in feeding ecology, feeding cognition, and urbanization of macaque species. So in addition to the work on Nicobar long-tailed monkey, we are also working on bonnet monkeys in southern India. And we are in the Nicobar long-tailed monkey project. We are focused on the ecology of the islands with the long-tailed macaque at the center of our project. And like my colleague has mentioned, we are trying to understand the dynamics between people in the Nicobar Island and the macaque population there. I'd already attended your talk in July of last year, and I'll be excited to get additional information from this workshop. Thank you, Sabrina.
Thank you, Sarantan. Next, I have Harold. Hi.
Hello. I'm Harold Browning. Oh, sorry, I was clicking things clearly. I'm another note taker as well, so I'll be quite quiet today as well. For my work, I work for Animals Asia. I'm an animal welfare advisor, and I mostly work every day within Vietnamese government rescue centers. So helping them with their rescue, confiscation, release, the laws, the design of sanctuaries for 61 species they have at the moment, and that covers 5 macaque species. I also advise and do design and help with husbandry for other projects like Scorpion, who are in this. I help them as well.
Thank you, Harold, and also for your time. Not speaking.
That's all right. I'll stop my video just because I'm writing. You don't need to see me typing away, okay?
Sure, thank you. I think the last one is Chuk Pong. I pronounced your name right?
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah,
hi.
Cook. You can call me Cook.
Cool. Okay.
I am Cook from Animal Asia Foundation. So I am animal welfare assistant. So now I am supporting a macaque project in Vietnam. Yeah, nice to see you all here.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you everyone. So in case there are those who missed out, the
No, Sabrina, you are mute.
sorry. So I will be going through the details with the steps that we take for the monkey guarding, and then we will discuss more in depth in terms of the challenges and applications that we can put. Okay, so I will just share my screen now. All right. Okay. So during the presentation earlier, I shared this slide. So what I'll be going through is basically every step in greater detail. So the next slide, so you saw this. It is important for us to take note of this because monkey guarding is not applicable at every scenario, right? We need to understand that, especially if there's no green space, if it requires other intervention, or in the unfortunate case of a real incident bite, right? So I've already mentioned this, but we will discuss this in greater detail in the workshop in terms of all the challenges that we face. So now over to the first step. So the first step that I mentioned before you do the monkey guarding is like a little research that we have to do, this background knowledge that we have to do, right? So basically you need to identify the key individuals or the troops per se, as well as the hotspot hours. So I mean, macaques typically they all have their usual routine and the timings that they are usually seen prominently, especially if they have this habit of entering a certain residential area or hotspot area, we called it, right? Because with this information, that's where we know around what time do we need to be extra vigilant. And then after that, we identify the food source. So identifying food source is two-way, either whether it is identifying whether there are people within the community that are feeding the macaques directly or indirectly. Identifying food source could also be the natural food source. Sometimes some residential areas, they may grow fruit trees. And if they are not careful with harvesting the fruit or taking all the necessary measures, it is essentially a direct food source for the macaques. This could also include like bean centers, which are not managed properly. So I mentioned earlier in my presentation that sometimes if this step is actually being identified and rectified, monkey guarding is not exactly necessary because the monkeys will start to eventually break their bad habit of entering that compound or area when they realize that there's no food source or any of gain for them. So I was mentioning natural food source. So, in Singapore's context, a lot of people like to grow like mango trees, rambutan trees, durian trees, and it's a delicacy for the macaques, right? So this is an example of a natural food source. So there's a flaw, even though there's a bin center, it's not being kept properly. So these actually contribute to where the monkeys usually like to be seen or where they like to come in from during the hotspot hours. So non-monkey proof bins is also one because bins like that is so easy for the macaques to just open and topple up as compared to having more monkey proof bins or integrated measures. So what I've seen is when we do monkey guarding, right? When we do a background research, we do realize that the macaques, they have many sleeping trees. When there's direct food source or feeding, we do realize that the macaques shift their sleeping tree closer to this food source. So before we did the first pilot monkey guards project, what happened was there's this particular troop that we've been studying. They shifted their sleeping tree right beside this residential estate. And then we realized that because when they wake up, they just like cross the road and then they go to the guard house and the guards feed them, right? So over time, this behavior makes them a little bit bolder, and that's where they start to advance into residential area. And then they try the first floor, and then the problem goes on and on and on. So part of the monkey guard when we started was we wanted to reverse the behavior of the security guards who've been feeding the macaques. So they are now monkey guards, right? And of course, easy access to natural food. We know that macaques are, they're very good, their memory. Every household, they know which unit they can get access to food and things like that. So these are all important, vital information that we need to know by hand. So, one thing that we note that a lot of residents, they feel that during hotspot hours, if they just don't just keep their food out of premises and they just leave their windows open, the macaques will come in. But sometimes all it takes is, just one resident not cooperating during the process of trial of monkey guard. And macaques, they don't necessarily need trees to be leaning on a building. They're like ninjas, right? They can just climb up. So I'm just gonna play this video of how So in this video, you can see that most of the residents actually have their windows closed when they are not at home or when they know that it's a hotspot hours. But sometimes, there are one or two that may forget, and this actually encourage the macaques to visit. That being said, when they come up, they can just easily scale down. Right? So, of course, some residents find it very, very comical, but when we share these videos on media, it actually let people realize that it doesn't mean that you don't have trees leaning on, you can be complacent, right? So this is just some examples of how all the background info that we need. So this is an example of a bungee cord that we were talking about. This item we sometimes we provide, we just use our own pocket money and buy it for residents. But it can be easily they can buy it at any local store at such a cheap price. And I've showed this video earlier on. Right. So, but like I said, sometimes we do need to reinforce our presence. We've worked with some residentials where on top of the bin, we actually place signs where please remember to latch the bin so that monkeys are not deterred from such things. Okay. So all that information gathered, then we identify where do the monkeys usually like to come in from and where do they like to exit from, right? They usually have a route, they usually have a pattern. And when we do monkey guarding, it is important to place your body like an invisible wall. So you're a wall between the macaque and the premises or areas of interest to them. So for example, this female, she likes to usually come in from the security guard house because she used to be fed there. So essentially, she's behaving calmly because we've been doing this for at least a week. But of course, prior to that, the macaques will start to attempt to, push you away or try to move around. But essentially, the whole point is you want to continuously deter them and not guide them towards the premises that they want to enter. And then the last step is, of course, to identify the area to guide them. Of course, not every area has a luxury of a clear definition of, this is a house and that's a forest. That's very clear cut. That's where you want the macaques to shift in. But on other areas that I've worked with, for example, the Singapore Zoo, where the wild macaques stay within the park and there are animals in the collection, it is obviously not possible to push the macaques to a closest forest because that's where they are. So within that area, that's where we have to decide within the park, where are the macaques allowed to stay or be around and where is a big no-no for them. Okay, so this is just for example, how you just deter them off. Okay, so after all that is being said, then that's where you do the guarding. So in terms of guarding, it's no one size fits all because guarding, there's two ways, right? One is you just stand your ground as seen in this photo. So the lady that's holding the stick or the tool, she's essentially just standing there to prevent unnecessary direct contact between the people and the macaques. Even though the macaques are just sitting there, just doing their own stuff. But you can see in this photo that the potential attractants are the baby prams and potentially, the kids are holding the bottles. Sometimes if it's left unattended, the macaques will go through it. So the whole purpose of a guard is to prevent that unnecessary interaction as well. So at the same time, being there also reinforce the fact that during hotspot hours, the macaques will always be there. So this is number one, how you want to do your guard. So basically, you just maintain and assert your presence. And macaques are visual creatures, they remember, and they remember the guards very well. So, later on I will talk about how the process of trying to guard, it has to be as standardized as possible. And if you are not confident to do guarding at all, it is best not to do it yet until you are prepared and ready, okay? And of course, with the use of tools, right, especially when you're using it in the public eyes, the public might not see it as if you are trying to help the macaques. For me personally, when I first started monkey guarding, I've had a lot of residents in particular who felt like we are trying to harm the macaques by holding the stick. So how you hold the stick is actually very important. You don't hold it in a way that you're taunting them or trying to smack them. You use it in a position to assert and tell them to move in a direction. And the distance that you can see between the guard and the macaque is used as a safety barrier as well. If you're intending to do guarding, especially in parks of recreation places where there are people around, it is good to remind the monkey guards to inform members of the public that, look, we are doing monkey guarding for the safety and also for your safety and as well as for the macaques. At the same time, you have to always be assertive, but not disrespectful of the macaque, because you don't want to aggravate the situation and make the macaques act in self-defense. So another way is to guide them off the premises. So it's not done in a very hectic manner where you're running after them or screaming after them. It is all about learning to read their body language. Basically, if they pause, you pause. When they move, you move, while still playing around with that safe distance, right? So you can see here in this video that I let them know that I am approaching. I don't just approach them immediately. If they start to approach me, I pause first. I play around with that safe distance. Then once they're still, I continue to approach and use the stick. So this is one example of how you can use the stick to deter them. Then sometimes you gotta pause and then let them think. So typically when one move, the rest will move, right? So this is a simple scene, but there are of course some scenarios where the macaques might be a little bit more resistant to move. So sometimes people ask, like, so if there's like 30 of them in a troop, how do I ensure that all of them leave the troop? So the whole purpose of monkey guarding is essentially you are targeting the bolder individual. So usually it's the alpha male or he's sub-alpha and he's like that first line of defense, because they are the ones that typically will enter the premises first. And then usually the moms and the females will hang on at the back first before they proceed on, right? Because there's all this calculated risk that they have to factor in. So essentially, monkey guarding is once you continuously deny entry from the bolder individuals, the rest will follow in the direction. So this video actually shows the macaques post-guarding, how they are returning back to the forest. And they actually do move in an orderly manner. So this group was at least approximately 30 of them. So this male here is the alpha male. You can see that where he moves, the rest will actually follow. So this is usually their exit route. So we want to make sure that it is clear, and over time they realize that this is the path for them to move, all right? So one thing to note is the residents in this area are actually okay to have the macaques on the perimeter, but not enter the unit. And that is it is fair enough because it is almost impossible to eliminate sightings of macaques, especially houses which border nature reserves, right? So, yep, so this is like one way to determine where's their exit route. So a few things to note when you're doing monkey guard is at all times, always keep a safe and respectful space. So especially if the bolder individuals already leave the premises, and then you have the females who are pregnant or babies or young or the juveniles, you have to also be very mindful and not be complacent that they will just completely follow. In this video, you can see that I'm just walking with them, and eventually I'm pushing myself to walk in between them and the housing areas. So if you listen closely soon enough, right, you will actually hear the vocalization of the alpha male who's actually calling the troop to return back to the green space, right? I'm not sure if my audio is working. Yeah. Whoops, sorry. Right. Okay. I think there's something wrong with my audio, but all right, let me just proceed on, okay? All right, so there was an example of how the troop typically moves post-guarding, but during the process of guarding, like I said, never let your guard down, even when you know that the troop is going to leave the premises, right? So in this video that I'm going to show you, essentially the alpha male is already going to leave. But what happened was behind him shortly later, one of the female actually let out a cooing call, and the male immediately just turned and charges towards me because naturally, you know, they're protective, right? Usually if you are the only person or human that's close by, you will immediately just instinctively come down. So that's where I meant that never let your guard down, even when you know that the process of monkey guarding is going to end. Right? So instances like that do happen. So that's where we play around with the usage of manpower. So sometimes if it's just one person who's doing the monkey guard, you have to be mindful that you are confident enough to stand your ground. Even if you need to back off, you don't immediately let your back face the macaque because you don't want to show submission. But of course, if you have 2 to 3 people who are doing guarding, then you split yourself up. One person that is walking in line with the alpha male, second person could be the one in the middle, and the third person at the back. So some sort like you're shepherding them out of the area, right? So young individuals may try to test water. So for example, this individual, he's the last few ones supposed to leave the premises, but he might suddenly make a U-turn and try to, you know, stand guard after what he sees from the older individuals. Right, so but you can see that I actually stood my ground. So long as you just stand your ground, they will immediately be deterred away, and then using the stick as my safe distance, right? This is something which is very, very common as well. And yeah, go ahead and ask questions as you go along, right? I will just pause here and there. Yeah, so at all times to discourage close contact and play, because you know they're individuals, some of them might play around. For example, this video, this happens so often. Right, and what the last note I have is have patience, right? Because they're all with different personalities. Some of them might trust waters, but so long as you know you stay consistent and standardized with your method, they will tend to move away. So for example, this female, she has a tendency to just waste her time and linger around. But sometimes you just need to reinforce your presence by using your stick, whatever tool, to just tap onto the nearby railings, and she will move away. Okay. Okay, so I will pause here before I move on. And I think I have some questions. And if you have any questions right now, just feel free to, shout it out first.
I was just wondering, I only came in and joined partway through because I'm bouncing between different talks. So sorry if this is addressed.
No
but
problem.
Are you aware of any other cities or places where a similar program has been implemented, and if there are any differences between like how it works in those places and in Singapore?
So when we first started this project, it was mainly adapted from, we have the Gibraltar Barbary macaques, right? Because they have monkey wardens there. They're there to prevent direct contact between macaques and the people, but they're also there to do like guided monkey walks, which essentially is what we do on top of that. What we do with Bali as well, they have the monkey guards, but obviously we didn't replicate everything that Bali is doing because there's feeding allowed as well. But recently when I went to IAR, and International Animal Rescue in Jakarta, we trialed a monkey guards there within the housing areas. So that's being replicated there. But of course, the level of temperament of the macaques there takes a little bit of time because of the overlap in that level of used to humans. Yeah. Answer the question.
Thank you. And I'm also just wondering if, well, you said Barbary macaques, and they're quite a bit bigger than long-tail macaques, aren't they? But I was just wondering if similar measures can be used with with maybe like pigtail macaques can be a lot bigger than these sometimes. I'm just wondering if there are any massive differences there.
So when you're talking about monkey guarding, right? So one thing that usually comes up to question is, so application is one, right? But being able to apply it is another. It is not necessarily chasing after or deterring the macaques. It's also the steps that you take to prevent that step of trying to deter, right? So now, like what I said that I go through earlier on, like identifying the food source, so it's all those integrated measures that were shared in my presentation, where we get the town council, the committee to have education notices on board and all that. So monkey guarding kind of just comes in to amplify the efforts. But that being said, it's not like we are there all the time. So when we try it for like a week, there's a constant review every week to understand how is the progress, how is the perception, how is the feedback level that's coming down. But in terms of handling the macaques, personally for me, I've back in ACRES when we had a sanctuary in Laos, we trialed the monkey guarding with the stump-tailed macaques as well. It has worked, but of course it's also understanding the social dynamic of the particular species of macaques. And of course, the bigger the macaque, we play around with the distance as well. The long-tailed macaques in Singapore are among one of the smaller size, so of course we are happy with 2 to 3 meter distance. But with the stump-tailed macaques that we trialed in Laos, we had to widen it to at least 4 meter of distance. Yeah. That answers.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Okay.
Hi,
Shamini.
Sabrina.
Hi.
I have one question, like if there are any like foods in the garden, like home garden, like they have some like fruit plants and some like vegetables in the garden area, then do you think that macaque goes on that like the way you saw is nice, but like in my field experience, like when my macaque groups, like when people they want to chase the macaque away, but if there is a food source near to the human, then it's very difficult for them to deter away like easily the way you guys are doing. So I'm wondering how that works in when the food sources are available in that area.
Yeah, so good question. Recently, we've been working with a lot of areas that have a constant food source, right? So for example, shop. shop owners, shopkeepers, and especially like now, I'm working with the Singapore Zoo, where they have cafes that are open during operation hours, and the macaques are constantly there, right? So, for example, with cafes and shops, what we've done is actually there's a sign that educates people that, look, if you are intending to dine in here, just be wary that these are the hours that the macaques will be. So there are a couple of steps that we take. Number one is if there's an option for people to sit within or inside the shop, then they will do so. But if there isn't, then that's where you have monkey guards on standby to deter the macaques, right? So that's for cafe. But for like agricultural area and planting areas, that's where monkey guarding may not exactly be applicable, but that's where the measures comes in to making it less attractable. And that's where, like, you know, covering or coming out with innovative ways to make it a bit harder for the macaques to gain access. We've worked with a lot of residential areas that has their own planting and crops and all. So what they've done is they've sprayed like diluted turmeric on the walls of the fences, or they even put like, you know, fake rubber snakes and all. So these are just temporary measures to deter the macaques. But that being said, you know, they will realize that it doesn't do them more harm. So they keep repeating the steps. So they play around with like the laser pointers, which you don't point directly on the macaque's eye, but somewhere near, or they use a pressure hose, which again, you don't spray at the macaque, but near their rear. So they keep playing with it just to make it a bit harder for the macaques to come by. So in terms of areas like that, that's where monkey guarding is a little bit harder. And that's where they need to focus more on the ways to make it less attractive. Yeah. Okay. I think I have Sharmini.
Yeah, hi Sabrina. Two questions.
Yes.
One I put in the chat, which is, have you had a situation where it's been very nerve-wracking, you know, with volunteers and it's gone wrong, so you've had to use some safety measures? I'm going to let you answer that one first before I ask my next one.
Okay, so safety measure that's gone wrong. Water spray hasn't
any kind of safety measure, but you know, like it's different when you do it, obviously, because you've got the experience. But when you've left your volunteers to do it after training, do you arm them with any kind of safety measures, so like, you know, a water spray or something like that when they're doing it initially on their own?
So okay, so for starters, right, like when they graduate from the training, they usually don't go out alone. They are usually in a paired system, right? In a more systemic manner. They usually have the hiking stick with them, right? So far we've not had anything that's gone wrong, except for one resident who actually used a rubber snake to actually try to deter the macaque. So she was actually very, very angry that the macaques kept visiting her bin. So she just coiled a rubber snake around it. But what actually happened was there was a young macaque that went by, took the snake, and then just bit off the rubber snake's head. And then when she came home, she saw that whole sight and she was very, very angry. And that's where that agitation made her forget about the key steps about monkey guarding. So that's where she took the water hose essentially and sprayed at the kid. And that's where, you know, naturally the mama macaque and the dad was very upset. And there was a conflict that happened between both of them. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. But I mean, like for monkey guarders who are ready to go out, we have an assessment checklist to make sure that they are fully ready to go out, right? Because the reality is I can train 10 people for monkey guarding, but not all 10 will be able to apply that skill immediately. Some of them need more practice. And that's where we tap onto the skills, right? So that's where monkey guarding is holistic. Out of 10, maybe 5 are better with people skills, right? Like doing the surveys and talking to the residents and so on and so forth, while the remaining 5 will be focusing on the macaques and doing all that necessary steps. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Great. Sorry,
Yeah,
can I just ask the second question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Question. This is a bit abstract. So looking at learning theory, because it looks at what you're doing is, especially in the video, when you're tapping, when the macaque moved to the tree, you back off. So it's almost like you're doing this negative reinforcement, you know, like when you are taking away the nasty thing when they, to reinforce their behavior of going away from the gate, right? Which is great. Have you tried using some kind of indicator? So instead of the umbrella or the stick, something made specifically, it could be like a lollipop stick, you know, like a giant lollipop stick, that's specifically an indicator so that when they get familiar with this, you can almost leave it there and that will act as a deterrent. Have you all tried anything like this? So without a person being there, but there's an association with this item.
It's a very good point. We have not evolved to that stage yet, but I think we can consider that the most that we've done is not something that we've done, but what a resident has done is actually they made a human scarecrow of the resident himself. Because for that case, the macaques, when they see the resident, it reaches a point where she doesn't need to do monkey guarding because they already associate her to something negative, right? So she just put like a human scarecrow and she put her own shirt and shorts and all. And it did see some effect for a while, but you know, it only lasts for a short term. Yeah, but that whole lollipop thing is actually a great idea, which we would be interested to tap on. Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you. I think next I have
I have one question.
Yeah.
How have you considered the solitary males? Like they are not in the group and they roam around, you know, like when that there are no other whole group also in that area, but solitary males approach in that area. So how have you considered about them? Thank you.
Great. Yeah, good question. So the solitary males or the transient males, right? Like, you know, usually if it's one or two, actually that is one of the bulk of our work actually right now, you know, especially now that we're super urbanized. So this is where it gets a bit tricky because like particularly for Singapore, for a city in nature, we're trying to make people see, if they see a macaque passing by or a python or a wild boar, they should start to see it as a norm, because we have buffer parks around our island. So for solitary males, we're trying to educate people that naturally the males disperse and they're just trying to move to another forest, right? So that's where, as a working group, we have to decide if that solitary male or one or two males are within a vicinity where there's green space nearby, where they can sustain and they can live and have enough food source, then that's where we apply monkey guarding. But however, if they're right in the smack of an industrial area and there's no green space, then it doesn't make sense for us to do monkey guarding when there's no natural green space for them. So that's where a different approach will come in. Though education will still be there, we might need to consider relocation of the males. But it's a fine line, it's a very tricky line, because we don't want the community to think that, oh, you relocated this macaque in that scenario, why can't you just do the same thing for here? Yeah, so that's something that we're constantly working on. Yeah, but it's a very tricky approach for that. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
I think Saeed, put your hands up.
Yeah, well, thank you, Sabrina, for your interesting talk. Well, although this is not my research species, but I was wondering, are there any different behavioral responses in terms of their macaques' personality? So some individuals maybe avoid more frequently from the gardening or something like this. Are there any evidence that, for instance, bold or risk-taking individuals try more times to invade, or how I can say, to do something? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Yes, we definitely have over the years of doing guarding, as much as we've encountered different kinds of humans, we also encounter different kinds of macaques with personalities and how they respond towards monkey guarding. You see, you know, some macaques, they may, the minute you hold a stick, right, they immediately ran away, right? But then there are some individuals where you hold a stick, you tap on the ground, they're still not deterred. They still stand their ground, right? Bearing in mind that there's no food source, you've eliminated the food source, there is a clear pathway for them to move on, but they just stand your ground. So that's their personality, right? So for that kind of scenario, there are many steps that we take. One step is we gather like more monkey guards. So for example, 3 monkey guards against 1 macaque, then they naturally will be more inclined to move away. There are also other steps where we give way, we give a little bit more space, because sometimes 2 to 3 meter distance, the macaques might feel a little bit more defensive. So we back off and move a little bit, give more space. So in a way that we're trying to give them, look, you have more space to move. We are here, we're just waiting. And if they're still not moving, we just reinforce our position, like waving sticks or using our voice and things like that. So we see that a lot, especially if we're working with a group of macaques, right? Unfortunately, sometimes the alpha males, they change, new males come in, and then it's a process of trying to get to know, okay, who are you? How is your personality? How is your perception? If we are lucky, some alpha males are actually the easiest one. They will move away. And sometimes it's the matriarch of the group that tends to pose as a problem. All right. Usually it is between the alpha and the matriarch. The young ones, usually they just try to test waters, and then the younger ones will just follow around here and there. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, I have Monica.
I was hoping if you could comment upon, when you first started this program, did you see any sort of temporal shifts or shift in the ranging of the troop that you were guarding? And also, were there, for instance, increase in other areas which were residential but still not guarded for some reason? I mean, again, this would depend on the number of people you have engaged and the geography of the area, I understand. But if you saw the increase in the frequency of visits in other residential areas, non-guarded ones. And I'll come to the second part of the question later, I think, if you can answer this.
So I'll answer your first question. So the first question is whether I see a shift in their ranging space with guarding. Am I right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. So
even in the time, did you see a change in time, for instance, for them to come and visit when there were lesser guards or no guards? Yeah.
All right. Thank you for your question. So the thing is about monkey guarding is we're not trying to change the routine of the troop, because especially on areas where the houses are just bordering the reserve, this is just part of their transact every day. But the whole purpose of monkey guarding is we want to break those bad habits that they do along the path, right? So in terms of whether we do see a shift in their ranging space, we do see that, but that also factors in with season. So like fruiting season, or if there are construction going on nearby, or like the buffer parks are closed and things and so on and so forth. This is also accompanied with research. So some of these areas that we have monkey guarding, we do have some individuals who are wearing the GPS collars. So we do see them spending lesser time around the residential area and more time within the forest and nature reserve. Okay, in terms of whether we see an increase of macaque sighting in areas that are not guarded, so the thing about manpower and the use of monkey guarding, right, is like it's not something that we have it in the whole of Singapore. It's just an approach that we are adopting. But due to manpower and resources, we are very selective on the areas that need urgent intervention. So for example, we know of areas where there's high interface between people and macaques, but then again, it's just a norm, and the number of feedback and complaints is not as high as compared to an area with lesser macaques, but then the feedback and concerns is higher. So that's how we judge on areas on where to decide on the guarding. Okay?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Second question.
Second part of my, yes. So this is something that we come across in our study area, although I mean this might not be related to the monkey guarding topic, but so it's a peri-urban area, and so there are settlements, but then there are also patches of say secondary forests. So that's where monkeys spend their time sometimes in these patches where then they don't interact with people and they're not chased out, and then they from time to time they come out and be around the settlements and go for edge in the kitchen gardens, and some even enter the houses. So the troop, our focal troop is actually 16, 17 individuals, and it's a smaller one when we compare it to the other two bigger troops around that area. And what happens a lot is the smaller troop, whenever they are inside these patches, they always get chased out and ultimately get pushed into these urban areas. And then, so even if a lot of the time they are using the residential spaces only to pass, only as a passage, they are still, they're still chased out. So that's one area where I see a big challenge in trying to also explain to people that they may not necessarily come and forage in your garden, but they also need that your area to pass from one patch to another, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting note. We also encounter that a lot in Singapore, where there are some troops on a daily basis. It's just a common path that they use often. So scenarios like this, what we do is we gather information on the path that they take, and if possible, we actually hold a joint, like a town hall session, where we get the residents and the management involved, and then we flash out on the screen, like this is a map of your estate, and this is where the macaques are. So on a typical day, this is the route that the macaques actually take. So essentially, we're trying to make people understand that this is a natural process, a natural traffic area that the macaques usually take. So the houses that are affected, that's where we actually get the buy-in support, that during hotspot hours, this is where we need your attention the most. Of course, there will be some who are okay to follow our advices and all, but there will be some that will be like, why do we need to do this? Why can't you just put a trap there and cull the macaques and things like that? I don't feel free in my home. No, especially now with COVID, more people are staying at home. So that's where it gets a bit tricky. So that's why we tie in, like people like Acres that comes in, or the National Parks Board to come in. So with people who are a little bit more resistant on trying to do just a little bit of alteration in their daily habits, we talk to them a lot to really target what are their concerns with regards to the macaques, so that sometimes at the end of the day, it's actually, we realize that it's more about just listening to the people, and sometimes they actually have a greater concern as compared to the macaques. Yeah, but in scenarios like this where we're not there to relocate the whole troop of macaque just because it is inconvenient to someone. This is like the strategies that we come in. Yeah, I hope that answers.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, I have Kai-Shen next.
So just wondering is if we spot macaques foraging around or in the rubbish bins, should we actually deter them back to the natural green space? And the other scenario is when we see someone feeding the macaques, should we deter the macaques or deter the humans?
Very good question. Thank you, Kai-Shen. So the first component, which is the bins, right? Actually, the both examples that you use is a scenario that I use when I do monkey guards training. Right? So because monkey guards training, there's the theory component, and then there's the practical component where the participants get to apply what they learn. So for the bin scenario, if you see macaques like rummaging through a bin, it is definitely advisable to deter, because you don't want to encourage that behavior, especially depending on the location where you're at, especially where it's high interface with people, the parks, residential areas, and things like that. So it's important to deter. But that being said, if you're not comfortable to deter, then do not take matters in your own hands, because sometimes people have the right intention, but they don't have the right knowledge or the right tools to do so. And that's where conflict actually happens. If you would like to deter and if you don't have a tool, you can just, before you even approach the macaque, it is best to let your presence be known, right? So you can just use your voice or clap your hands or stamp your feet, let them know about it, right? But, most of them will usually go, but usually it's the alpha or the bolder individuals are still on the bin. And if you're still not confident, best to not take matters in your own hands, right? But if you have a tool or a stick with you, wave it up, tap it on the ground or tap it onto the bin, they will generally move away, okay? But if in the event that, you know, they stole your food or someone's food, it's best to just let it be, because there's no point trying to pull the food away from the macaque, right? Unless it's a personal belonging, then unfortunately, you know, if the macaque go up a tree, you have to wait till the item drop, okay? For the feeding instances, so whether you're a monkey guard or not, right, your focus should be on the people when you see instances of people feeding the macaques, because there's no point trying to deter and push the macaque if the food source is so great behind you. The reason why macaques approach people is because of food, right? You got to eliminate that factor first. So when you eliminate that factor, and the visual creatures, when they don't see it anymore, they will move away, right? So if let's say you have two monkey guards, right? One person attend to the guests, the people or whoever that's feeding or have food to keep it away. And then the other person guard and monitor the macaque's behavior. But if it's just one of you, then just focus on the person. Okay? Hope I answer your question.
Thanks for the tips.
Okay. All right. Next, I have Sayantan.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I wanted you to comment on when the deterrence actually stops working, and at what point in time have you seen any behavioral indication of the deterrence not working? And in fact, the individuals or the species, and it could be a few individuals of a group, which gets habituated to the process of deterrence, and then stop reacting altogether. And you have mentioned that there are bolder individuals that tend to do this. But do you think there is an intensity response to this, that the more you do it, the less effective it could become? Do you see that sort of thing?
Yeah, thank you for your question. So that's a very good question. So, you know, monkey guarding is a multi-pronged approach. So far throughout our experience of doing monkey guarding, we only had one recent incident of a macaque that was not deterred by the tool at all. But this was because of the effect of the environment that he was living in. So his family group was actually 60 of them, but there was an ongoing construction going on. So the group actually split into two. So now he's occupying another green space, right? So this is actually within the park, which is the Singapore Zoo. So because of the stress that happens with the troop and the environment and all, you could see that he actually transfer that stress or heightened defensive behavior towards the people who are guarding. So you reach a point that when the person is actually holding a stick to guard, the macaque actually charges and try to pull the stick back. Right? So that's where we realized that using a stick to guard him is not going to help. And even if we just stand still, he will still come and run and just stop right in front of your shoe. So that's where we know that he's a very stressed out animal. So that's where we realized that in terms of monkey guarding, instead of focusing on him, we need to focus on the people aspect. So we got to make sure that people, when they identify and when they see him, these are the steps and so on and so forth to take. Right? So that's where. In terms of habituation towards the tools, so monkey guarding, like I said, is a multi-pronged approach. It is not about constantly using the tool to guard. So for people who are trained to be monkey guards, so like there's like many steps, right? So like level 1, the beginner step is to learning to use the tools, right? But once they are comfortable with it, once they are good in learning to read the macaque's behavior, a good sense of the environment and the perception of the people, that's where they move away from using tools. So they use their own body to deter the macaques. But of course, that's being done safely while still keeping a safe distance, while still learning to read when to stop and when to move when they see macaques. So, you know, tools, when I say, like I showed you, is the umbrella or the hiking stick and so on and so forth. Other areas that we've done monkey guarding, they've used like laser pointers and the water gun, but these are not used directly on the macaques. It's used near their body area. So this is especially important because, it is no point guarding a macaque that went up a tree or went up a fence in which you can't reach. It's no point trying to guard because it's impossible. So that's where measures like using a laser pointer or a water deterrent do actually help to a certain extent. Right? I hope I answer your question.
Yeah, thank you. Could I ask one more, please?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I mean, you are mentioning that it's a multi-pronged approach. So to what extent do you also integrate ecological knowledge of the habitat that the troops you're trying to deter? How much role does that play? And do you have access to that sort of information, especially from areas where you tend to get, say, not many calls, but those areas have previously not been visited? So how do you then take this? Doesn't it also become a moral dilemma whether a troop that, say, for instance, you have some inkling that they might actually be very urban habituated, and those resources that are within human areas are actually very essential for their sustenance. So under those conditions, how would you go about deciding whether to deter those monkeys?
Yeah, so that's a very important question. So, within a working group, I mean, that's the beauty of a working group, right? We have like NGOs, like, Jingle Institute and ACRES, but we also have the National Parks Board. We also have the Research Institute. So currently what we have, a research that's ongoing is we have researchers who, number one, do population census. Number two, what's new is they're actually collecting fecal sample of different troops of macaques. So whether they are at the forest fringes, or they're at the core of the forest, or those that interface with human. So from the fecal sample, they're trying to understand the diet, the range of food that they eat. And from there, that comes that survey where a separate group is also doing, which is actually what I think I understand Jingle Institute is actually going to embark on, which is a public perception survey. So all these do tie in together. But in terms of deciding whether we are going to do monkey guarding there or not, that actually relies heavily on the number of feedback that we receive for a certain area. So like I mentioned earlier on, it's not about the size of the troop that we determine to do monkey guarding or not. It is reliant on the number of feedback. And sometimes it is also a potential area which we feel is going to have conflict. Yeah, hope that works. So it's a constant balance that we play between science and ground facts. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I have good.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, I saw your macaques a bit different with the macaques in Sumatra. I mean, in terms of behavior, it looks that the macaques in Sumatra in general are more aggressive than the macaques you showed us. For example, they are so familiar with human. In Sumatra, we have many problems with this kind of macaques, the long-tailed macaques. For example, attacking or frightening students at schools. They can go to schools and also they have problem with government office too. They frighten the employees and make problems. And we were asked to help handling that. My question, are the macaques you are showing us originally from, maybe all are from wild, but are these macaques wild macaques or semi-wild macaques, or are they from former pet macaques?
Okay, thank you, Kuno, for your answer. I understand what you mean. When I went to Jakarta to look at the macaque situation, definitely their behavior is definitely way more defensive than the ones in Singapore. So the first question is the macaques that I show you. So the videos actually show them, their behavior post at least 6 months of monkey guarding. So you can see that their temperament is a little bit lower, right? These macaques that we are monkey guarding, they are wild macaques. So they're not like from, you know, like pet trade, or they were pets or things like that. These are all wild macaques, right? But of course, there are many examples where we have macaques who are extremely explosive. But the minute they see you coming, they will run, right? And that's where you have to be a little bit on a more heightened alert when we do monkey guarding, right? So when you tell me that, you know, the macaques are being aggressive and they're like chasing your staff or the schools and things like that, we have similar incidences as well. And the other thing about monkey guarding is they're very smart, and they can tell whether you're fearful or not. So sometimes that some areas, especially in schools, we have a lot of university campus where the forest is just adjacent, and then there's macaques passing by and things like that, right? And the macaques, they're able to read people. If there's a source of food or something that attracts them, they won't be deterred to, you know, run towards the person, especially if the person doesn't know what to do when they see the macaques. We've had some very wild macaques, and this is especially seen in some parts of Singapore, especially those that are off island of Singapore. We have little pockets of islands around Singapore where we have done monkey guarding as well. But at the end of the day, the principle still applies, right? Before you even want to do monkey guarding, you got to understand what's the root cause of why they are behaving in a certain way in terms of their defensive level. So we have a chart where we grade them accordingly, and what are the required steps that we take before we want to approach the macaque. Okay?
Can I have another question?
Yes,
please?
sure.
Yeah. Is there any kind of macaques that are more aggressive or larger in body that you separate from these macaques, or it's just or not? Do you divide some which are bigger body?
Yes.
Or not?
So in Singapore, the macaques are typically smaller, but there are some areas where they are larger in size or fatter, if for lack of any other words. Okay. So on areas where they are like obese and bigger in size due to, you know, many years of human food high in sugar and fat, yes, these are areas which we don't just have monkey guarding in place, but we do have like a monitoring of their diet. So that's where our research on like collecting the fecal matter comes in, to understand the ecology, their feeding habits, and as well as their health, right? Are they in a, obviously they're not in a healthy stage. Yeah. So yeah, because we only have long-tail macaques in Singapore. So, you know, in terms of size ranges, we can only divide them whether they are of a healthy size or on a slighter obese side. Okay, I hope I answered your question. Okay, I have Gwennon.
Yeah. I have a question regarding how do you do when they are traveling on the buildings? Because in Bali we have the case that they are just traveling on the hotel area, and sometimes we just cannot follow them to avoid them. They are traveling. So how do you do in this case?
Thank you. So on high-rise buildings, we work with some of the hotels in Singapore that's close to our forest. You know, the macaques climb up the building right at the top, or if there's an opportunity, they go to the guest balcony door and things like that. So one thing to note is it is not applicable to do monkey guarding when they are right at the top of the building, because number one, you also have to make sure that your safety, right? You don't want to be chasing macaques at the top of the building. So, you know, usually we tackle the issue from the base when they are on the same level with us. We utilize that advantage because we use our body height because we're bigger than them when they're standing on the ground, right? Which is why the minute the macaque climbs up a tree or a fence or a building that's higher than you, then it's no point doing guarding, and it's no point just standing there and watching them, because all the more they know that they are at an advantage, right? So this goes back to the level of tolerance and perception of people. If people are okay with macaques just traveling across the building from one place to another and not disturbing or doing anything, then we have to just let it be. But however, if they're going up and finding opportunities to scale down and enter units, then that's where the education and integration aspect comes in, right? Yeah, I mean, even for us, when we do guided monkey walks, sometimes people bring baby prams and they just park it at the side of the forest, and then the macaques gain access to it. They take the keys or the bags and or a tablet, worst case scenario, they go up a tree, and there is no way for us to do guarding. And there's no point for us to stand there and just watch the macaque. We have to take a few steps back before they drop the item. Yeah, so I mean, in terms of high-rise building, it is impossible to do guarding. So we tackle the problem right at the base of the ground. Okay.
Yeah. So if you can basically avoid they reach the building, like to prevent they climb it, but yeah. But that means you should to be all the time in the place to watch for them to avoid they climb the building.
Yeah, so areas where we do guarding, especially in high-rise residential area or schools or things like that, we're not there 24 hours. We're just there for 2 to 3 hours in the morning and in the afternoon. So there's like shifts, right, for the monkey guards. So they are there to prevent the extra work of chasing macaques up the building. They are there they position themselves strategically on areas where they know the macaques have to scale up. But we have to accept the fact that 1 or 2 will successfully go up the building. And sometimes they just want to have a view of what's it like on top. I've had like macaques that just love the view from the top. Like at 6 p.m. in the afternoon, they just like to chill right at the top. And then like 6:30, they come down and go back to their sleeping tree. Yeah, so it's again, there's a balance of,
I totally agree. I'm just asking because most of the time I saw them traveling, and people complain because they are breaking the roof on the way, or just stop because they saw a snack on the way. Because how you could resist to a snack? Come on. Yeah. But I was wondering, because here they are using slingshots. So most of the time the slingshot is empty, but sometimes they are using stone and hurting the macaque like blind monkey. So I don't really like it, but they don't know how to do to avoid them staying in their roof. So some people doesn't care, but some are like, oh, but they are breaking my roof, and so
yeah. We have sure we have that, especially like during festive occasions, like Christmas coming up, people who live in the rooftop, and then they have decorations and open decorations right at the roof. That's where we actually like let them, like we preempt them. We don't tell them on the Christmas week. We tell them perhaps on the first day of December that okay, it's gonna be a holiday season. The macaques will come, blah 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 blah. So in Singapore, we have an increase in the number of wildlife feedback during Chinese New Year and the Hungry Ghost Festival, because there's more food source out there. But more and more, we're seeing that a lot in festive occasions and holiday season. Yeah, so but like for all these rooftop areas, is more of a preventive measure that we let them know. Okay. All right, next, Brooke.
Hi there. I think Monica and Ali had their hands up before me, so I'm quite happy to wait.
Okay. Monica, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I was just curious if you observe the monkey's responses are different to guards with different physical build and different sexes.
That's a very interesting point, which I actually wanted to share. So, for monkey guards, we somehow tend to get a lot of females who want to be monkey guards. And we've had a student, an undergrad, who did a research on the effectiveness of monkey guarding, and she went to all the areas that we were doing monkey guarding, and the result was 80% of it was successful. And a lot of our monkey guardians are actually female. We don't actually see a difference of whether, if it's a male or a female monkey guards, the macaques are, more deterred in one way or another, but we do see them reacting differently based on the confidence level of the monkey guards, right? So we've had like a monkey guard who's holding a stick and trying to deter the macaques, but then her body posture shows that she's fearful, so the macaques didn't budge. Right? And then we have got a monkey guard who's extra confident. So there was no lack of patience component in that monkey guard. And that in effect actually aggravated the macaque that he was actually trying to deter. So there's no differences whether it's a male or female monkey guard, but the factor really depends on the level of confidence of the monkey guardian. Okay?
Yeah, that is really interesting.
Yeah. People usually see like, oh, if you're like taller or bigger, the macaques will be scared. But actually, what I've observed, it is not true. I think Sayantan?
Yeah. Hi, I have one more question. So have you come across any indication that would be telling of any subtle adverse behavioral effects of monkey guarding in terms of food-related intra-group and intergroup aggression? Do you suspect any gradual long-term effects on the monkeys?
So I didn't get the last part. Could you just briefly repeat your question? Sorry.
Yeah. So do you the second part of the question?
Yeah, maybe just run through the whole question. Sorry.
Okay, sure, not a problem. So yeah, so I was wondering if you have seen any indication of a subtle adverse behavioral effect of the dispelling process, the entire act of monkey guarding, in terms of say food-related intra-group and intergroup aggression.
Okay.
Also, could there be any? Do you suspect any gradual long-term effects on the behavior of monkeys?
We actually have not seen that, because typically the monkeys, they react, so the alpha or the matriarch of the group is the one that we usually focus on for monkey guarding, right? And that's where they move off or not, they deter accordingly or not. We don't see any intergroup fights or conflicts going on among each other. However, we do see that on areas where there's high food source. And this is especially seen in groups which are larger in size, like more than 30, and there's like food source there. We do see an increase in intergroup conflict going on among each other. I mean, just yesterday, I was doing a monkey guards training assessment, and it was a group of at least 35 of them. So what happened, there's like cyclists were there, and I think they have bananas, which they were suddenly so afraid because the macaques came, and then they just threw the bananas. That actually caused a fight between the conflict going on inside there. So in terms of the effects of monkey guarding, we've not seen that impacting on troop conflict. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Ali? Hi.
Okay, thank you, Sabrina. It was a very informative presentation for me. I was very interested with your monkey guard program. For me, it is very innovative idea. I mean, for your information, we also work on this problem, on this issue, and yeah, if you mind, I want to ask your opinion with this similar problem in Sumatra. I mean, we've also faced many macaque human macaque conflicts in urban area. I want to compare this method to the translocation way, because some residents want to ask us to capture the the macaques, and move them to the forest. So I want to compare this way. Maybe you can share your experience on this with us by comparing this to maybe capture all the macaques in your urban area and move them in the forest. That's one of our work on this year. We several times we asked to capture the macaques, but I don't have another option, another effective way to solve this problem. Maybe you can share with us, Sabrina.
Yeah, thank you, Ali, for that question. So I mean, I totally understand that pressure, right, that comes in for residents who ask for translocation or trapping of macaques in Singapore. We face that a lot too. But in Singapore, how it works is back then, years ago, where every agency and groups work separately, when there's a need for trapping and relocation of macaques, sometimes all the groups don't actually know about it. So it happens behind our back. But that being said, right, translocation, it doesn't work, especially if we don't have a natural green space. But then we also have to understand the ethical aspect. Say, for example, you remove a problem male macaque, an adult male macaque, and then you just release him in a nearby forest where there are macaque troops that are already established there, right? The chances for him to integrate into that group is like it's a very slim chance, right? Because it's so hard for an adult male to integrate into the group unless he somehow managed to overcome and overthrow the current existing male. So what we've seen over the years, and why we do not use this translocation method, is because a lot of these males that are being released elsewhere, they become a problem macaque at that area. So the problem doesn't solve. So it's like transferring one problem to another problem, right? So this information, backed by science and observations and data, is where we actually share it with a residential area that is pressuring us to do all these translocation and recapture of macaques. And we show them that, look, it's just transferring another problem. And another thing that we wanted to share is also because of the fact that, you remove one or two macaques from another area, you might not have the problem for at least a few months or a few weeks, but then the problem happens again because there's a power space, right? More macaques will just come in and fill up the gap. So that's one thing that we focus on. But with the formation of a working group and things like that, we leave translocation as the last resort. So I'm not here to say that, in terms of managing macaques, you should never translocate or you should never consider culling. That should be the last resort after you've exhausted all the efforts. So from joint efforts, education, outreach, backed by science, backed by data, and then you have all the other approach by monkey guarding and talks and outreach and all. When all these don't work, then that's where you do consider translocation and relocation. I do know that sometimes, pressured by people of the higher up or by residents who are very, very vocal, they will say that, no, we don't want all this, we want a quick fix solution. That's where we have to balance, right? As people who are advocating for people to find coexistence with macaques, right? But of course, I think this is really up to individual organization in terms of their principles and their beliefs. Like, at what stage do you stop all efforts and take the last resort of translocation? Yeah. So I hope I answered your question. Yeah.
Yeah, if I can add something on this subject, is also I recently read that translocation also can decrease the survival of the individual you are translocated. So there is a chance at the end that the group you translate just disappear dying because not enough food in the new environment you are translocated in them, or fighting with already group around. So yeah, it's, as Sabrina said, like the last solution.
Yeah, so yeah, nicely said. Thank you. Okay, yes, Brooke.
Thank you for all that. It's really, really interesting. And I'm kind of aware that we now have about half an hour left, so there may not be time to get too into this question that I'm asking, because we also have to come up with outcomes and actions and stuff like that. But yeah, I just wanted to know whether anybody who's here now is either currently working on a similar type of sort of project in their areas, and what are the similarities and differences. But if not, I wanted to know whether any of you think that the monkey guarding program could be of use where you are, or if it wouldn't be of use in your particular area, why wouldn't it? What would be the differences? Is it to do with culture, or is it to do with like the physical environment, or what? So if anybody has anything to say about that, I'd love to hear it, bearing in mind that our time is limited, of course.
I'm happy to go first very quickly. I'm very keen to use something like this in Malaysia, and to probably get Sabrina down to train. My challenge will be getting the volunteers, because we have struggled with getting volunteers consistently. And the alternative is to get like an allowance, a small allowance for volunteers. And of course, the challenge there would be to get funding to fund some of these volunteers in the more long-term capacity. But definitely something we want to look at.
Yeah. Can I just add in? Yeah, so what Sharmini said is something that personally, even for me in Singapore, it's something that we face. So when we have pilot projects, we have to constantly get grants, because we don't want to be dependent on the people in the working group, because we're all busy managing so many projects, right? And the whole point is we want to transfer these skills to the people in the community, but at the same time, as much as it is good to have volunteers in place, it is a challenge personally for me to retain the volunteers. Like once the project ends, I can't guarantee that they will stay on, right? And so that's where we decided that a more sustainable approach is to have a paid position for this. But then everyone's kind of at ends with the budgeting. So, I mean, if you want to have monkey guarding in place, it has to be sustainable. And I think that it has to be a paid position. One thing that has worked currently is we tap onto people who are already working on the area. So for example, like parks and areas, it's like an added skill for them to learn. So on top of their daily work, if they see macaques, they know that, oh, okay, I switch on my monkey guard mode. So they are monkey guards now. So like in the Singapore Zoo, they call them the wildlife rangers. So what they learn as monkey guards, they can also apply it if they see the wild boars coming in, or the snakes, and so on and so forth. So they are there to help the wildlife that comes to the parks, but they are also there to educate guests. Mm-hmm. So guests who are potentially going to go into our own parks and see macaques. Yeah. So I understand that challenge with the manpower.
I think it's also the difference of mindset.
Yeah, exactly.
We always envy, because Singaporeans obviously have a different breed altogether compared to Malaysians.
Yeah. Yeah, anyone else wants to share? If this is something that you can apply, some aspect of it. I'm in the process of setting up my website where I will actually show the steps, the key steps that we take in monkey guarding, some of the success stories and the lots of failures that we have. So once it's up, I will definitely share it in the coalition, and everyone
Please
can have
do.
it.
Yeah, we'd love to link to that.
So,
and I think it's really important that you're going to include failures as well as successes?
Yeah,
Because
it's
no, none of us want to do that, but really that just could stop so many false starts in other places.
yeah, because not everything is colorful, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone wants to share?
Sorry, can I just make a comment about us making this publicly available? Is there a concern then that people might take this on without the actual training? So any Joe or Jane that looks at it on the website will then decide, I'm a monkey guard and I'm going to train myself on the website.
Yeah, so that was why it took me forever to decide on making it public. So what is shared wouldn't be very detailed. It's essentially it's like graphics, to show like macaque on the forest, and then the forest age, then what happens when like they're at the residential area, and then there'll be of course a link where if you want to be trained as a monkey guard, and then no one should do this if you're not trained as a monkey guard. Yeah. So we tap onto the press a lot. So when the press picks up on this, we've many times tell the press to make sure you put this statement on, like if you're not trained, do not do this. And this is applicable with like wild boars and otters as well. Like don't rescue if you see an injured animal, like call this helpline, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Yes, Monica.
Yes, Sabrina, I was wondering if monkey guarding, if one were to apply this in a place where monkeys have already been chased, they're used to being chased by sticks, and like not just by farmers who have sticks at hand, but also in households where monkey visits are frequent. People have like a stick or say even, I don't know, utensils and among other things to keep at hand whenever monkey visits them. So they're already they've already been exposed to these tools and they have a negative association with it. So how would then this be used as a tool to just guiding them as opposed to scaring them? And the other thing is, we've also like some of the troops that live in say the plantation forest matrix don't live around people as much, are so sensitive to something like this that even initially when we go for observations, they are even scared of these camera lenses or even binoculars. So yeah, could you describe was this the scenario before you started this program, and how did you circumvent around it?
Yeah, thank you for your question. So in terms of tools, right? So even if like, let's say we've had areas where people use the tools wrongly, so they have the intention of trying to deter the macaques, but then they use the tool wrongly, and that actually made the macaques act in defense, right? So it doesn't mean that they can't reverse that behavior. Of course, there's that fear, there's that stigma where I don't want to use it anymore. I'm very scared because this was what happened to me, blah, 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 right? So that's where we come in and give a targeted training for that specific household or for that specific group where, there's appropriate usage of the tools. Very simple, like even for houses, right? Houses where they are constantly visited by macaques, we teach them to actually place the tools strategically at the area where the macaques tend to like appear from. So even if it's a balcony, right, they have this like stick nearby so that when they know that the macaques are there, the tool is right there to grab and not taunt them, but use it appropriately. The kitchen area as well. So it's about reversing that tool. And sometimes we are there for the first few days during the action so that they are more confident and they see that, look, it actually worked. So that's for there. For areas with where the macaques are very, very sensitive, and even if you raise your camera or your binos or things like that and they run away, we've had macaque troops that are like that as well. But most of the time, these are troops that we actually don't do guarding at all, because we focus our guarding only at areas where there's high interface with people and there's conflict. If you know, if the macaques are, when they see you and they immediately run away, then that should be a good thing, because there's that healthy fear towards people. Yeah. I hope I answered your question, Monica.
Yes, yes, makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? You know, any questions? Wants to share?
I think, oh, Dave, were you about to say something? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask whether you do much work with regards to sort of education work on actual coexistence with the macaques, in terms of, you know, I can understand like what you're trying to achieve from the guarding, but I just wonder whether trying to change that public perception so that more people in the community actually accept the macaques when they're in the community may also be part of it. And, you know, maybe getting people to understand the sort of emotional bonds, as you mentioned earlier, between the individuals, the social bonds between the individuals, and maybe trying even to relate that to, you know, their own family bonds and things like that, just to try to get people to maybe see the macaques very differently, and whether that has had some impact, or whether, you know, whether you've got an example where you have done that and a community perception has changed.
So what we've done, I'm sharing a failure that happened years ago when we started monkey guarding. When we started monkey guarding, we did like a pre-survey to understand how people perceive macaques. And then with all that data, we just dive straight to monkey guarding, all right? Because we thought like, okay, let's just focus on macaques. And we didn't really pay much attention to people. And we didn't actually pay a lot of focus. We just gave like brochures and, you know, like simple stuff like don't feed the monkeys, blah, 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 and so on and so forth. But then we realized that it took longer for the macaques to reverse the association that respond towards monkey guarding. So after that pilot project, what we did is we have monkey guarding, and then we have like a package on education and outreach that happens concurrently. So every few months, we review, we do a survey or evaluation of the residents, whether the perception and attitudes have changed. And that's where we alter accordingly the education materials, which are the areas that we need to focus on. And in terms of education materials, it's no longer like telling them ABC, because people don't want to hear like, don't close your window, don't feed the macaques and things like that. Because most of the time, people already know what to do. But it is on just some specific incidences that spark that fear or concern towards macaque. So that's where the education and outreach is very tailor-made and catered towards the needs of the people. So, you know, after that being said, that is something that we've molded so that it becomes more holistic when we do monkey guarding. We do see a perception in that. We tap onto social media a lot, and then, you know, recently we've got a lot of excellent video makers, photographers who go out and help to film the macaques and take nice photos of them, because we're trying to move away from the photos of, you know, macaques sitting on a bin and feeding and all, because there's always creates this perception that macaques are pests and things like that. And also tapping onto the media, you know, news reporters that we know very well, that if they are going to publish an incident about macaque, we make sure that they try to use a more positive photos rather than, you know, macaques in an urban, like on a bin or holding a can of drink or something like that. So we are starting to see a shift in the perception towards macaques as a nation. And that's where we are actually going to embark on an attitude survey of the macaques and wildlife in Singapore. So, you know, once the results are out, we can definitely share and see how it goes from there. Yes, Nadia.
Yes, I wanted to ask if you could, if you should choose one obstacle or problem that is the biggest when you start in a new area. So what is one, if you should choose only one, and funding, I think that may be the biggest. So if it's not that, what is the biggest obstacle getting started?
It's definitely buy-in support. That's a big thing, because especially on areas that are fresh and are new and we've never heard of, is getting that buy-in support, because news spread, right? And sometimes these areas, they will tell us stuff, right? After we present our approach, they will tell us stuff like, oh, my neighbor from the other estate, they've had macaques, relocated. Why can't you just do the same thing like that? So that's a challenge, getting buy-in support. And the problem with buy-in support is sometimes, even after we get the buy-in support and we are ready to implement the pilot project, right? And we are going on fine and all, but sometimes all it takes is like one small incident to happen, or a macaque enter a house and all. And unfortunately, it happens to a resident who's very, very vocal. And like I say, Singaporeans are very vocal. They just go to the press, or if they know someone from the government, and then they just report it. And then we just lose complete support. So that's where we decide, like, can we help anymore in these situations? Yeah, so buy-in support is one of the it's the biggest headache we have right now. If we are stuck there, we can't do anything already.
Yeah, so if I could ask then, what is the best way then to do that, to get that support?
So we use success stories. But of course, it has to be relevant to the location where these people are living. We can't like compare people who live in high-rise building, that success story, and apply it to those who are living in the landed private homes. We use similar scenarios to show, like, sometimes we also get the residents who've converted to become more macaque friendly, to help us, like, share their experiences either through like forum news or social media. So at least it doesn't come like from us, where they think that, oh, you're just biased because you're just representing macaques. Yeah, so there's some strategies that we work here and there, and connections. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else want to share? No? So I think in the chat, Jocelyn from ACRES sent a link about some of the materials that ACRES has. So if you go to the link, right, they have advisories on specific wildlife animals. So ACRES plays a big role in when we do joint visits on talks. Even though our focus will be on macaques, but we are very strategic. We come in and we say things like, we are here to teach you how to coexist with your wild neighbors. The macaque will be the last part, where people are calmer, and then we talk about macaques. So that's a strategy. It's actually like people skills, which somehow work. So we're sticking with that method. So ACRES has that. ACRES will come in and talk a bit about, what do you do if you see a snake? What do you see if you see a monitor lizard, and things like that. And we add in a little bit of charismatic species like the banded langus, the pangolin, get people a little bit more excited. Yeah, and then when they're like calmer and cooler, then we talk about macaques. And the pictures we use are also very important. We make sure that it's those that tugs your heartstrings, like macaque with babies and things like that. Yeah, and we don't bombard it with too much science. So we are very, very careful with the information that we pick. If you're going to be talking to residents, we are not too sciencey. But if we only have 10 minutes to present our case to someone from the government or stakeholder, then we do all those charts and diagrams and stuff like that. Yeah. Yes, Brooke.
So I'm just wondering if, in what ways do you or anybody here think that we as the AFA Coalition can help implement, like support you guys in implementing successful programs like this one, wherever you are? We want to share your materials when you said your website's going to be up and stuff like that. So we'll be very, very keen on sharing them and trying to get them out to as many people as possible. But is there anything else that we can do, bearing in mind that we exist just to help you do the work, basically?
question directed to me or to everyone? Oh, sorry, muted.
It's actually directed at any of your groups, but it's just kind of, so what can we do to make it, to spread the word or to spread the method or whatever?
Can I go? I'll jump in. I was like, yes, this is a bit. I was actually secretly thinking about this, Brooke, so I'm glad you asked the question. I think what would work is if we had sort of like a bit of a section, like a coalition that's doing this. And, the training is all done systematically and consistently. So everybody, it doesn't matter what country, we're all doing it a similar way. And therefore, if we come up with a new technique, then you can implement it, like you're all discussing together. And so if AFA can either coordinate that, but also recognize then there's a need for funding. So as Sabrina has said, and I recognize that as well, that if we need volunteers or individuals that are going to be consistently doing this, then we need to have, like a long-term allocation of funds for them. But if we can, so it's not just one country, so we can say, look, we've got 2 representatives from each country. Can we look at funding them for the next 2 or 3 years? And they all get trained and they form a community, they communicate. You know what I mean? So at least there's some kind of long-term consistency that would be my suggestion and hope.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, because at the end of the day, we want to, as much as we want to be systematic and standardized in the way that we do the training, but we want to be exposed to as many scenarios as we can, right? So that we can apply it more universally, right? So I don't want it to just stick in Singapore or in Malaysia. I hope that, it can somehow be catered to different countries with different species of macaques. And, yeah. So if anyone has videos of the macaques, of the situation in your country that's going on, I think if we have a shared platform that we can put it in, and then can be discussed and how we can tackle that scenario, it'd be great as well. Because that's how I do it in Singapore. People send me videos and stuff. Yeah.
Wonderful. That sounds really good.
So, before COVID, I was supposed to go to Jingle Institute, India, to help, find ways to implement monkey guarding over there. But it was a bit tricky because it was a temple area, so people are used to feeding macaques. But yeah, we're making progresses. We're trying to network here and there. As much as we want to teach, we also want to learn. So it's a constant two-way thing. So anyone who's interested, just approach me. I'm more than happy to learn. I definitely want to learn more about what's going on in your country, the macaques. There's probably something that worked in your country that I can also apply in Singapore as well.
I've had a message that if we're about done, we can wrap it up. It's just 4 minutes early or whatever. And head into the main room. I think if I'm understanding my messages correctly, I think they're more or less done in the other group as well. So we can all just head back there to the main room, reconvene for a moment, take a short break so that we can get all our notes together, and then we'll come back and summarize everything and close up for the day.
Right, cool.
All right.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Fantastic.
See you in the main room.
See you.